It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Professor Sanjay Lodha and Professor Ashitosh Kumar, eminent panelists for today's panel discussion. I also warmly welcome each and everyone present over here. It is really an honor for me to introduce such an intellectual and learned personality to you all. Our first panelist for the day is Professor Sanjay Lodha. He is a very erudite and well-known personality in the field of political science. He has a rich and extensive experience of research. He has taken more than 40 papers to his credit. He has completed 15 research projects till now. Under his supervision, 3 scholars have finished their doctorates, while 10 students are pursuing their PhDs. 3 research scholars are pursuing postdoctoral fellowships under his impeccable supervision. He has been holding many administrative positions in various organizations and universities. He has been awarded numerous fellowships. He has been selected as visiting professor at Würzburg University, Germany, under the DAAD program, A New Passage to India. His areas of specialization include state politics, electoral studies, democratic process and outcome, governance and development issues. We really welcome you, sir. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and gracing this occasion. And now I hand over the session to you, sir. Please enrich us with your expertise. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sheetal Jain. Thank you, Dr. Varsha Upadhyay and other organizers of this national virtual conference being organized by Sri Vaishnav Institute of Social Sciences, Humanities and Arts. As was just observed by Dr. Sheetal Jain, this is the third panel discussion of this two-day national virtual conference. And the theme of this conference is a very pertinent and timely theme, imagining higher education in social sciences, humanities, arts, and journalism and mass media. Quite a wide-based theme which you have selected for this seminar. I am so glad that my dear friend, Professor Ashitosh Kumar from Punjab University, Chandigarh, is also going to be one of the panelists of this particular panel. Friends, as discussed with Dr. Varsha earlier, the theme which I have chosen for this particular deliberation this morning pertains to higher education at crossroads. Why I decided to pick up this particular theme is in the context of the National Education Policy 2020, which was declared last July by the Ministry of Human Resources and Development. And whatever has evolved over the last 18 months and before that, I thought that will be a good theme, a very timely and relevant theme for discussion today with this August gathering, which I personally assume that this must be a mix of faculty members, teachers, researchers, and maybe postgraduate students of your institution and other institutions in Madhya Pradesh and outside the state of Madhya Pradesh. So the immediate context of this presentation, as I just said, is the National Education Policy 2020. And the 5 basic principles or the goals which have been determined by this national education policy when it talks about quality, excellence, inclusion, affordability, and accountability. So these are the 5 salient objectives of the national education policy. Another immediate context which we need to keep in mind are 2 reports relating to education in India. One is, of course, is the report published by the MHRD in 2019-20, which is the annual status of higher education in India. And other is the very recent report, the ASHA report annual status of education report relating to education in India. The 2019-20 report talks about the phenomenal size of higher education institutions in India. And just to quote these figures at the outset, there are more than 1,043 universities, both public and private, and deemed universities put together in India, according to this report. We have more than 42,000 colleges in different parts of the country, and there are about 11,800 standalone institutions in the country. So this gives you an impression about the phenomenal expansion of higher education institutions in the country over the last few decades. And if you look at the statistics relating to enrollment in higher education, this again is a very promising scenario. It gives a very promising sign that in 2019-20, the gross enrollment ratio in higher education had increased to 27.1%, of which there's an almost equal distribution between males and females. In fact, it's a very healthy and positive sign that according to this particular report of 2019-20, females have outnumbered males as far as enrollment in higher education is concerned. Females constitute 27.3% and males constitute 26.9%. Another very important figure which we need to keep in mind right in the beginning is the gross enrollment ratio amongst the deprived communities. For scheduled caste, it is 23.4%, and for scheduled tribes, it is 18%. And lowest in the hierarchy are the Muslims, who are for whom the gross enrollment ratio is just about 16%. So it is in this context that this particular presentation is designed, and I'll share this PowerPoint slides with you. So as you can see on the screen, friends, the theme of my discussion this morning is higher education at crossroads, issues of inclusion and equity. These are the two major goals which have been set for higher education in India, not only by the recently declared higher education, national education policy, but also prior to this, also these were the two major goals of higher education in India. Now, if we look at the phenomenal expansion of higher education institutions in India, and just as I discussed the number of universities and colleges and lakhs of students that we have in these institutions, and the gross enrollment ratio, one very important research question which emerges before us, as you can see on the screen. So when we keep this unprecedented expansion in the recent decades, the question which needs to be posed before us as those who are involved in academia, as teachers, researchers, and students, how have the benefits accruing from the massive expansion in higher education been shared with different social groups? We all know that India is a very diverse society based on religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, and so many other variables. So when we say that phenomenal expansion has taken place, or as we in terminological sense, it is called massification of higher education in India. How this massification or the fruits of education in the field of higher education being shared among different social groups, that is going to be the major question on which I'm going to focus my presentation, so that you get a sense of the kind of discrimination that exists in higher education as far as gender is concerned, as far as social identity is concerned, as far as regional or religion identity is concerned. So this is what the presentation is about. And we all agree that education is one of the major tools for improving access to participation in the economic life of the country, to improve our own social well-being. So access to education has improved at all levels, and most children born in this century, that is the 21st century, are now enrolled in school as far as elementary education is concerned. Ironically, what is the dismal scenario which is before us is that these commendable achievements are accompanied by very wide income inequalities and persisting social inequalities. So we are reminded of the famous statement made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, that although we have given political democracy and political equality, but if social and economic equality is not brought about, then there'll be a major problem for the country. So what are the issues of fairness and inclusion? That these are the basis for providing or ensuring equality of opportunity, not only in education, but in all walks of life, whether related to recruitment and other areas. The concept of equity as fairness entails that access to higher education and achievement of one's educational potential are not influenced by group membership, whichever social group you belong to, whether you belong to OBC, SC, ST, economically weaker sections, whatever your gender is, whatever is your economic status is, wherever you live, or whatever disability you are suffering from, equity demands that these factors should not affect your access to higher education. Fairness is achieved only when the student hierarchy reflects the social diversity of the population. So as I said in the beginning, there's a lot of heterogeneity in India. There's a lot of plurality and diversity in India at different levels. So access to higher education warrants and demands that all these diversities should be given a place in the higher education institutions. And what are the issues to reflect upon, on which we should reflect as members of the academia? While access to higher education has improved across all segments of the population, whether it is SC, ST, OBC, non-reserved, gender, region, because of the progressive state policies of affirmative action, what we call as reservation, the rate of progression has varied. So all the different diverse social elements, social groups have not equally benefited from expansion of higher education. And that is why there's a lot of regional inequalities and socio-economic inequalities in our society. Furthermore, another dimension of issue which needs to be pondered upon by us, access to elite institutions and study programs such as in the field of science and engineering, what we call as STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and management. So students from the privileged backgrounds have easy access to these elite institutions, these elite programs, whereas those who are from deprived social backgrounds, deprived religious backgrounds, or deprived regional backgrounds do not have easy access to these programs and these institutions. The unequal distribution of institutions across regions leads to polarization of access to higher education. And as I said, regional inequalities in the distribution of higher education opportunities and overall unequal regional economic development. I'll discuss certain data with you after some time, which can make you understand what kind of inequalities prevail on according to different variables. What are the factors which affect inclusion and academic integration? Achievements in ensuring equity in access are further overshadowed by the unfavorable conditions associated with the academic progress and success experienced by students from the disadvantaged groups inside the higher education institutions and campuses. This is something which we observe and experience on our day-to-day basis whenever we go to our classes, whenever we go to our campuses, whenever we interact with the students. We generally feel that students who are from the disadvantaged groups, whether social or economic, they are not being treated very favorably. The prevalence of a non-inclusive campus culture. These are very important words which all of us as teachers, researchers, and students should keep in mind. The non-inclusive campus culture and the relative ineffectiveness of institutional mechanism, that is the administration of the universities and colleges, to address diversity result in inconsistent performances. Students from the disadvantaged backgrounds are not able to perform to the best of their abilities because of the non-inclusive campus culture. And this reflects in their poor academic achievement and their poor representation in labor market. That's why most of them continue to demand for reservation, not only in admission, but also in recruitment of the public sector. It is likely that STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and management subjects it is less likely that these subjects are studied in Hindi or a regional language, and more likely that English is the medium of instruction. So another level of discrimination is the medium of instruction. Those students who come from rural backgrounds, those students who come from disadvantaged sections, they have got their school education mostly either in Hindi or in a regional language. But the moment they come to higher education institutions, they are supposed to study their subjects in English. So that is another disadvantage from which they suffer. Furthermore, what we have to also keep in mind is that the inequalities which exist at the higher educational institutional level is also influenced by inequalities in the preceding level of education. That is at the elementary education level, at the level of middle school, at the level of secondary and senior secondary. These are also, issues which impact upon your enrollment, equity, or inclusiveness at the level of higher education. Higher education is offered only to those who have completed the secondary level of education, and the existing inequalities in secondary education may be reflected in the higher education also. And we need to keep in mind, and this figure will come up later on in this presentation, that at the secondary level, there is an enrollment of about 70%. And at the senior secondary level, the enrollment is about 50%. So what this actually means is that of all those students who have done schooling at the primary level, at the elementary level, only 70% of them carry on to the secondary level. And of these 70%, only 50% carry on to the senior secondary level. And we come to higher education. When we come to higher education institutions, as I just discussed with you, that according to the Government of India report 1920, the gross enrollment ratio is only 27.1%, which means that of all these 50% students who have done education at the senior secondary level, of those, only 27.1% make it to higher education institutions. What are the domains of discrimination? This is a very important slide which all of us should understand, and also not only understand and comprehend, but also take proactive steps to ensure that these domains of discrimination do not take place in our institutions. There are three types of discrimination which I have discussed here. Academic space, three spaces where discrimination takes place: academic space, social space, and administrative space. Academic space is the classroom and things really, all the activities related to curricular education. And generally, there is this kind of a impression that students who come from this disadvantaged background, SC, ST, lower OBC, they cannot be taught properly. They don't have the intellectual capacity to understand what we are saying. And so there is some kind of a discrimination at the academic level. Similarly, when we come to the social space of our campuses, we have the big example of Rohit Bemula in Central University, Hyderabad, who had to commit suicide because he was not being given space, social space in the university campus. The community of scheduled caste students were not being included in extracurricular activities of the campus. And so this student who was being discriminated in his research ultimately had to commit suicide. So social space where students from disadvantaged backgrounds have to be given adequate space in extracurricular activities, they are being looked down upon. And third is the administrative space, which deals with institutional discrimination, the treatment which is meted out to SC, ST, and other deprived students from the administration of our institutions. The way they are treated, the uncooperative attitude of the administration, that is another level. So these are the three major domains of discrimination: academic, social, and administrative. And if we look at the COVID times over the last almost 2 years, what has happened, and we can see that that there's a digital divide. Students who come from good economic background, who come from urban areas, are better placed than the students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, those who don't have a smartphone or an iPad or a laptop. They don't have access to modern means of education. And this was amply shown in the SIR report 2021, which has given the figure that almost 25% of our school-going students have now shifted to government schools from private schools because private education is unaffordable for them, and also because they don't have access to smart gadgets. So these are the domains of discrimination which we have to keep in mind. Another problem which we have to look at is the issue of dropouts. We all have talked about the problem of dropouts at school level and also at the level of higher education. And there have been different studies which have established that dropout is highest among the disadvantaged social groups like SCs and STs, who constitute a major share of those who drop out of the system. Most of them are first generation learners coming from rural background to the urban areas to attend these institutions. And there's a kind of a cultural gap which they experience. I know of a student of mine who came to do graduation with us. He came from a remote tribal belt near Udaipur. And he looked upon the university as some kind of a temple, as a hallowed place. And whenever he used to enter my office, he used to take his shoes off. अगर चप्पल पहन रखे होते थे तो चप्पल खोल के आता था, जूते पहन रखे होते थे तो जूते खोल के आता था. So this shows the kind of cultural gap which exists between different students who belong to different social hierarchies. Another issue which we need to ponder upon when we are talking about inequalities is the issue of regional inequality. Of course, we know that there is a lot of interstate, gap as far as higher education is concerned. States in South India are much better placed than the cow belt, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, where GER, gross enrollment ratio, is much less compared to states in South India. But I'm not talking about that bias here, that inequality here. The inequality which we can experience on a day-to-day basis is the inequality between students who are coming from urban areas and students who are coming from rural areas. This we have experienced in the sense that as far as Karnataka is concerned, Bangalore is one city which has the highest number of higher education institutions, more than 1,000 in Bangalore. And in Rajasthan, Jaipur is one which has almost 45% of higher education institutions in the country. Just a second. I'm in a university guest house, so the people who want to clean the room. So this gap, as you can see in the fourth bullet, in 2014, access to higher education remained low in rural areas, almost 20% gap between urban and rural areas. Another dimension which I have been talking about to you is social inequalities at caste, religion, class, and gender level. These are another 4 variables which we have to keep in mind when we discuss the issue of equity and inclusion. And now I'll give you certain data which, in a way, establishes categorically the kind of discrimination which exists in higher education institutions. Look at this. I've given 3 timeline: 95, 2007, and 2014. So if you look at male ratio, it has increased from 10.78 to 32.14. But there's a gap of almost 5 percentage points between male and female. Female was 27.73. A good sign is that, as I just told you in the beginning, according to 2019-20 report, now females outnumber males as far as enrollment in higher education institution is concerned. So over the last 7 years, much has changed because of the phenomenal expansion of higher education institution in India. But look at the social dimension. For STs, it is 17.19. For SCs, it is 22.31. OBCs, 29.36. Higher caste, so-called high caste, 41.65. And others plus OBCs, 34.13. So if you look at if you try to understand these data at a disaggregate level, the expansion in ST is, as far as ST is concerned, it is from 7 to 17, a 10% jump over 7 years. For SCs, again, it is a 11% jump. But for OBCs, it is a 15% jump. And for others, it is again 15% jump. So there's of course, expansion is taking place, more enrollment is taking place for SC, ST, but the rate at which this expansion is taking place is much higher for OBC and other castes, higher castes than the SC and the ST. Coming to the next data, look at the religious divide. Hindus, 17.85 to 31.97. Muslims, who are the worst as far as education hierarchy is concerned, they are lower than SCs and STs and all other groups. The gross enrollment is only about 16.5%. And other religious minorities, which are the three groups of Jains, Sikhs, and Christians, it is the highest. So these three minorities are the best placed as far as GER is concerned. They are higher than Hindus. They are much higher than Muslims. If you look at the class variable income quintiles, we can easily say that as you move up in the economic hierarchy, your gross enrollment ratio increases. From 0 to 20, it is just about 10%. And if you go to 80 to 100, it is almost like 74%. So there's a huge variation as far as economic affordability is concerned. Those who are economically marginalized, economically poor, their equality of opportunity is totally violated because of their deprivation. Similarly, rural, as we discussed, there is a 20% gap between rural and urban area. Now, this gives you a very important scenario. What this table, as you can see in the red marked figures, I'll only give you a sense of this table, which shows that students who come from rural background, females, SC and ST, mostly they are enrolled in humanities, agriculture and education. Whereas students who come from higher caste and prosperous OBC and urban students, they are mostly enrolled in professional courses like medicine, management, chartered accountancy, and computer courses. So even the type of courses which are being done, there is a gross level of inequality where students from deprived social backgrounds, deprived regional backgrounds, gender backgrounds are mostly enrolled in what we call as traditional courses of this institution where the seminar is being held. And the theme of this seminar is focused on humanities, social sciences, arts. So these are the subjects in which most of these students from the deprived backgrounds are registered. And those students who are from the elite backgrounds, who are from the privileged backgrounds, the data very clearly shows that they are enrolled either in STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and management, or they are in computers, chartered accountancy, and other these forward subjects, career-oriented subjects. So this is another discrimination which exists. Now, what are the factors promoting positive development? I'm repeatedly saying that things are not very dismal because expansion has taken place among SC, ST, lower OBC, rural students, and also girls. And this is basically because of three factors. One is, of course, the quota system, the reservation. Because of the reservation policies, more and more students from the deprived social backgrounds have been able to enroll in higher education institutions. The second is, of course, the incentive schemes given by different state governments, although there are so many people who study public policy who criticize these populist, so-called populist schemes. But because of these incentives, whether you are giving them fellowship, whether you are giving them free ships, whether you are waiving their fee, whether you are giving them scooters, scooties, laptops, these are all incentives because of which the gross enrollment ratio has gone high for the deprived students. And thirdly, a very concerted effort has been made by the government of India and state governments for education for all. And there are three major programs in a mission mode which have been introduced. You are all aware about the universalization of elementary education, which is the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. Then we are also aware about the RAMSA, which is Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan program for students at the secondary and senior secondary level. And finally, what we call as the RUSA, which is Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan. So universalization of education at elementary level, their massive universalization at the secondary level, higher secondary level, or senior secondary level, and now massification at the level of higher education, because as all of you are aware of, the National Education Policy 2020 says, or the aim of National Education Policy 2020 is that by 2035, the gross enrollment ratio will increase to 50%. So These are the very positive steps which have been taken by the state in India, both central government as well as state government. Because of this, so many students are enrolled. But at the same time, we have to abide by the democratic principles enshrined in the Constitution. We need to continue with the quota system. There should be more proactive state intervention at different levels. And the kind of inequalities which I have just posed before you, whether it is inequality according to subject, whether it is inequality according to social background, whether it is inequality according to regional background, whether it is inequality based on gender, these inequalities have to be addressed by the state through more pro-disadvantaged policies, through public policies which make a positive intervention as far as these deprived sections are concerned. Since we are all in the academia, what we need to do, friends, is that we need to be more proactive. We need to be more compassionate and empathetic towards students who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds. We need to do more research to find out, because whatever I have discussed with you so far emerges out of a research which we did at NIAPA about 3-4 years back. So more research is needed to find out what are the different levels of inequalities, what are the levels of discrimination which exist in higher education institutions. Only then we can achieve the objectives of NEP 2020. I'll stop here and thank you all for giving me this opportunity. And it will be such a pleasure to listen to my friend Professor Ashitosh Kumar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really a very enriching address and we really learned a lot. Now, the next speaker for the day has joined us, Professor Ashitosh Kumar. Sir, are you able to listen to me? Professor Ashitosh Kumar?
Yeah, I can hear you and I'm starting my video. So I hope I'm visible to all of you. Am I visible?
Oh, no, sir.
I'm not visible?
No.
Yes, ma'am, he is visible. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
देख पा रहे हैं आपको, देख पा रहे हैं आशुतोष जी, नमस्ते।
नमस्कार संजय जी, नमस्कार। बड़ा समय अभी ऐसा चल रहा है कि क्या बताएं। अभी हम आ रहे हैं उधर से, कहीं से आ रहे हैं हम, तो समझ ही रहे हैं कहाँ से आ रहे हैं, तो बड़ी मुश्किल से।
Okay, sir. No, you are visible, sir. Okay. So thank you so much, sir.
हाँ, आपने तो वो काम कर लिया बहुत समय पहले, है ना? चलिए। Okay.
Sir, your voice is breaking, I guess. I'm not here, but we are not.
My voice is breaking. It should not.
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, so shall I proceed for this, sir? Ashutosh, sir?
Problem from your side.
Okay.
I think I won't have a problem.
Yes, there is, ma'am. Wait a minute, wait for a few minutes, ma'am.
Yeah, here, Chandigarh, no problem, right?
No, sir. We are facing issue. Wait a minute, sir. Varsha, ma'am, am I able? You are able to listen to me? Am I clear to you?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So our next speaker has joined us. I welcome Dr. Ashitosh Kumar. And again, it gives me immense pleasure to read his profile. Sir is professor at Department of Political Science, Punjab University, Chandigarh. He has 34 years of expertise as a teacher. He is a well-known author with a large number of books under his belt. His 58 research papers have been published in reputed journals, both nationally and internationally. He has so far reviewed 37 books. 17 students have completed their MPhil dissertations under his expertise guidance, while 13 scholars have received doctoral degrees under his impeccable supervision. He serves on a number of committees. He has been external expert in the selection committee for the appointment of teaching faculty at the university level and also at state government colleges. He has also been an external expert for the evaluation of MPhil and PhD thesis. We are really very honored with your presence, sir. And now I hand over this session to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me, at the outset, express my regards to Professor Sanjay Lodha, who is an old friend and a very valued friend. We are fellow travelers in the field of state politics. And I'm also very much indebted to your institution to give me this opportunity to speak to the audience on a very important topic and something which is very close to my heart. And today I'm going to speak about, as you must have publicized, universities as public institution. So let me start with a quotation by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who spoke in the Allahabad Convocation. And he said that if the universities discharge their duties adequately, then it is well with the society, well with the country, and well with the nation, people. So basically, he also spoke about how the universities should stand for humanism. They should stand for openness. And you also may be reminded of Rabindranath Tagore, the way he spoke about freedom of expression. And also, like one can refer to the Constitution of India, the preamble, and also Article 19, where you have the right to freedom of expression for one and all. Am I audible? I can't see anyone here except myself. Is it working or not?
Yes,
So
sir.
you are
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, sir.
Working?
Yes, you are audible.
Working. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm assured. So let me start with those of my ideas that how do I see universities? I see university as the last bastion of democracy. If you have to look for any space where you can have democratic space, you can have a free flow of ideas, you have the young, energetic people who are committed citizens, then you have to look towards the universities. So why I'm saying all this, why I'm referring to Jawaharlal Nehru or Rabindranath Tagore or the Constitution of India, because we are what? We are a modern republican democracy. India is a modern republican democracy. And universities have to play an important role. We can't say that universities are to remain aloof from the society, or universities would not be impacted by what is going around in the society at large. Now, when we talk about university, see, if I'm from a university, so it would be very natural for me to say that universities are doing very well and there is nothing wrong with the university. We are doing very well. We are going from strength to strength. But what is the opinion of the people who are in the civil society? So generally, you find that there has been a kind of a perception that universities in India are in a state of crisis. They are not really, especially I'm referring to the public universities, that they are in a state of crisis. They are not really performing their duties. They are not really creating knowledge. And that is something which is very strange, because if you see India has a deep historical reservoir of knowledge. We have had a very rich knowledge tradition. And you don't need to listen to all these new historians. You know very well that India has been the place where there have been remarkable work in the field of mathematics, in the field of grammar, in the field of logic and metaphysics. Maybe that we were not so good in history writing or in other, but there have been in the philosophy, like nobody can match Indians. In fact, German philosophy, or many of the German philosophers like Max Weber or like Hegel, they all drew substantially from Indian philosophical tradition. So India has had a rich intellectual tradition. India has had a rich, we had one of the oldest university, I think the oldest university in the form of Nalanda University and Taxila University, much older than Cambridge or Oxford or the French universities established by Napoleon, right after French Revolution, 1789. All those public universities were opened in France. So that way, India needs to, especially if you read the new education policy, it says that India needs to become again, India needs to become a great nation, and India has to become the fountainhead of knowledge and technology, and India should take a lead. So what are the challenges before the Indian universities, if you think about the well-being of Indian university? One is what Professor Sanjay Lodha already pointed it out, this the need to make education inclusive. Because we all know that, unfortunately, after the later Vedic period, Puranic period, and the period onwards, a major segment of the Indian population was not really having any access to education, a formal education, women included, right? Women and the lower strata of the society. So this was something which needed to be worked on, and in fact we should remain indebted to the colonial regime in that sense that they started giving access to everyone in the modern education system, and they also the modernity brought a sense of equality and liberty and all those democratic values, liberal values among the people of India. Now the question is that if we want to make the education all inclusive, then what should be the role of the public universities? And there you have what Sanjay Bhai was referring to, the quota system and the affirmative policies to be adopted, and lowering the cutoff, and also promotion of the private universities. So I would like to speak something on these two aspects. One, nobody can deny that some of the communities have had early advantage in the field of education because of the hierarchical nature of Indian society. So it was, as has happened in the other field also, it was really very essential for the public universities to provide an opportunity structure. If you see the preamble also, it says that equality of opportunity and status. So the equality of opportunity had to be there. And as we all know, that equality principle can apply to the equal people. It cannot apply to unequal people. So if you see the early education system, or even the early universities, like which were opened by the British, or even in early years of Indian independence, the universities were dominated by the so-called upper caste people, or the privileged segment of the society. Even now, I think this Deshpande work is there, who now teaches in Ashoka University, I think. Earlier, she was in Delhi School of Economics. She has done Ashwani Deshpande. She has done a Oxford University Press book. And also you refer to Nirjat Gopal Jayal, both representing India. They all have pointed on Surinder Jokla also. They all have given you the data. And the data tells you that even now in the public universities, among the teaching fraternity, you don't have much representation of the so-called lower classes. Right. As far as the students are concerned, there also you have a definitive difference, like in the sense that in the social sciences, you would have now more and more people coming from the rural background, coming from the lower strata of the society, whereas the much more lucrative courses, which have the market they provide a kind of a job opportunity in the market economy, they are now crowded by the people from the upper segment. So this kind of dividing the society, or from the schooling itself, if you see the Indian education system, the schooling system already creates a divide, and that divide continues in the university. And there you talk about lowering of the merit, So this is something very contentious issue, that on the one hand, you talk about the right to equality. On the other hand, you have this protective discrimination. And then you talked about that this may be one of the reasons why the universities are not performing well. So this is something, an argument which needs to be rejected, because if you won't have the affirmative policies, if you won't have the reservation thing in the university system, especially in the early years of Indian independence, probably some segments which were, I mean, not some segment, I think major segment of the society which were excluded for centuries would have remained excluded from getting access to the higher education. So this is one point which I would like to emphasize, that the government needs to promote the public universities. The government should not abdicate its responsibility. Right now, we are seeing that in the field of higher education, the successive regime, whether it's a UPA regime or NDA regime, they have been abdicating their responsibility, and there has been much more focus to promote private universities, private sector. As we all know that our private universities are not like Harvard. They are not like, they have not been established for there can be an exception like Azim Premji University, but most of the private universities which have been established in India, they have a very clear-cut profit motive. And the kind of fee, you know, if you refer to the private universities, like say Harvard, you have a fee, but then they give 60% of the students in Harvard, they get fellowship. Or even those who are paying the fee, like in Japan or in South Korea or in US, they are paying 8 times higher fee than the public university. I'm referring to Andre Bete's work, right? And so he has collected all the data. So there you have in India, what kind of fee structure the private universities demand? They demand much more. I think 70, 80 times. I have been told that there is a law university which charges 45 lakh a year for a law degree near Delhi. So this kind of thing always exclude major segment of the people, whether they belong to upper caste or the lower caste. So how can you expect the private sector to take the responsibility to promote the higher education in India, a country of such a size and a country of so much diversity and so much heterogeneity and so much inequality? So this is something which the government has to carry on the responsibility to make higher education more and more accessible to everyone in India. Especially, as you know, there was an agenda of Indian government to provide 30% of all the students having the higher education by 2020. But what has been the percentage? And this is one thing. And second thing, which is also very much a matter of concern, is the quality of education being, quality of learning and education and the research in the public universities. In the foreign universities, you have the research university and you have the teaching university. You have research professors and you have the professors who have been given the task of teaching. But what is happening in Indian university system? Almost like 40-50% of the teaching posts have remained vacant. In Punjab, I think recently, because the elections are on the anvil, the government has recruited some teachers for the college after 15 years. There are states which are progressive states. You know, Punjab may not be doing very well economically, but what about Andhra? What about Telangana? What about Maharashtra? You just see their feeders. For years and years, they don't make any recruitment. Or for years and years, in Punjab, for example, my students have remained temporary teacher for 10 years, you know, getting 25,000 a month. So how can you attract better talent in the education system? And if you appoint a person as a teacher who is not competent, he's going to ruin the career of 30 generations. You know, 30 years a teacher would be there and he would not be teaching because he never studied and he would not like others to study. He would not really promote. He would be involved in some other things. That's why most of the universities have become the den of politics, you know. So this is something which is very much a matter of concern. Another thing I would like to say, that how the marketization or how this so-called neo-economic policy of reform is no longer new because it started in 30 years back. But this, under this umbrella of this globalization of the new economic policies, now there has been much more emphasis on the market-oriented courses. So there are courses like management, there are courses like engineering or the technology or this applied sciences. So two things are happening. Since the universities are they are starved of funding, so many universities, including my university, Punjab University, which is one of the oldest university, third oldest university, I think, or fourth oldest university in India, 1881 university. Earlier it was in Lahore. Even now you have Punjab University, Lahore. It has been forced to start self-financed courses. And all these self-financed courses are oriented towards market. You have management in hospital, management or this management, that management, So there are so many management courses being offered by Punjab University in order to get the money, in order to generate resources. In the process, what has happened, because there has been so much emphasis on applied sciences like biotechnology and this technology, pure sciences, they have been neglected. So university like Punjab University, which had a very strong tradition of, very strong departments like physics, chemistry, there you have a lack of staff. On the other hand, you have new departments, new centers coming up and appointments being made there because there the students come and pay high fee. So there is a world of difference between the fee you pay for the regular courses or the traditional courses and the kind of fee you pay for these self-financed courses. So universities are being forced to cut down the research because most of the research, and that's why when I hear that Indian universities are not really providing cutting edge research, or they are not coming out with invention, no Nobel Prize for any Indian working in Indian university, how can it be? When you don't have the enough staff and when you met the teachers take classes, like I'm such a senior person and I have to take 2 classes every month, every day, and then you have the research scholars, and we were 14 and we are now reduced to 6 people in the department, and there are departments where you have 1 teacher, 2 teachers. How can they do justice to their research? How can they do justice to their teaching also? So this is something, the education sector has been completely, higher education sector has been completely neglected. In earlier period, we always, when I was a student, we used to say that the primary education was neglected. That was one of the major flaw of the development planning model, which remains a major matter of concern, primary education and the secondary education. The schooling system is also very bad, the government schooling system. But at that time, you had the IITs, you had the IIM. India was such a poor country. It was not even a lower middle income country. But we had those world-class institutions we created, IITs, IIM, and the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, and also ISI in Kolkata. So we had some institutions coming up in independent India when India was not such a prosperous country. India did not have the resources, but we managed. But now all those institutions, except, so there are island of, merit, island of excellence. And even I find that the government also is promoting this. This is kind of a betting on the strong policy, something which we saw in Punjab in the form of Green Revolution strategy. That those institutions which are doing well, let us fund them and let us make them world-class university. But what about the rest of the universities? We have hundreds of universities in India. So there is a hierarchy, like we say now, hierarchy between the ordinary law and the constitutional law. So there is a hierarchy between the central universities and the state universities. And then among the central universities also, some central universities which are doing well, they are funded, they are looked after, but there are universities, central universities, which are also in a very bad shape. So this is one problem which is there. The second problem is that this under globalization, there has been this tendency that the developing countries like India, they should promote primary education. They should promote higher education only to produce the people who can contribute in the service sector. So there is the research and the development, R&D, that should be the sole preserve of the developed economies. That is not true. If Indians can do so well going abroad, and they can excel themselves, and they can become the global leader, corporate leaders, how can they can't do well in India? So the opportunities should be there, laboratories should be there, the funding should be there. Otherwise, you can't promote Nobel Prize winners just like that. It's just like in Olympic, you cannot invest without investing, you cannot have the world beater. So this is something which is another matter of concern. Another matter of concern which I find in the university system of India is the issue of leadership. Because most of the universities are, all universities are supposed to be autonomous, and universities have to be autonomous. They have to have certain autonomy. But then how this autonomy has to be used, how this autonomy has to be used to make the universities better university, that depends a lot on the leadership quality, the vice chancellors, what kind of leaders you are appointing in the university system. That makes a lot of difference. You can see that some private universities, I'm very sure about your university also, if it is a private university, I don't know. So most of the universities which are private, the private universities which are doing well, they are doing well because they have very competent leadership. Or IIT is doing very well because they have competent leadership. The directors are very competent people. But that you cannot say about most of the public universities. You hear a lot of stories about the way the incompetent people are being appointed as the vice chancellors, or the people who do not have the knack of becoming academic administrators. They are, and then even those who are good. I remember my earlier vice chancellor, Professor Grover, who was academically very competent, and he was a man of ideas. But he would say that most of the time, I'm concerned about how to bring the finance. So if the vice chancellor is concerned about managing finance to take care of the salary dispersal of the staff, then how can a vice chancellor think about academic excellence of the university? So funding is very, very important factor, but along with the funding, accountability. And there I would come to the teaching community, that to what extent teachers are accountable, to what extent teachers face problem if they don't perform their duties. Why there is so much trade unionism among the teachers? Why teachers are so much in politics? Why are they not concerned with teaching and the research? So this is something, some kind of accountability, because when you see, I'm not an anti-teacher, but I would say you that all these 7th pay commission, 6th pay commission, they all come and they give you fabulous, I think I remember 6th pay commission, that was out of the world, right? Huge incentive, financial incentive to the teachers. I think Chadha committee was there. But there was also a stipulation in that committee report that the teachers should be made accountable. But those accountability factor has not been really taken seriously, but the teachers got their salaries. So this is something that you demand everything, but you don't really perform your duty. So some kind of accountability factor should be there. And that doesn't mean that the government should interfere and the government should punish. Within the university system, there should be a mechanism where the oversight bodies, UGC and other whatever HRE they are going to create, they should ensure that how there can be internal mechanism to ensure the quality in the educational institution. I think I have spoken for almost half an hour. I would just finish by saying, saying that we all should think about well-being of the universities, and it's all the responsibility of the government also, because if India has to become the world-class economy, India has to become a great nation or the reservoir of knowledge once again, as the new education policy says, we have to take care of all the universities, and the universities is scattered all over India. Right now, if you see the publications, most of the publications come from Delhi. Most of the publications, I think somebody has done work also on it, Partha Chatterjee and IC Sar also, that most of the publications are being coming from the faculty of universities based in Delhi or in the social sciences especially. And social sciences are important because, you know, the liberal education, just to give emphasis on technology, science, and all, that is not going to make Indian society a much better democratic society, because the faculty to criticize, the faculty to promote the liberal values, that can happen only when you promote the social sciences and the humanities also. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. It is always a great pleasure to listen to such a erudite personality like you, sir. And now the forum is open for discussion. Audience, if you have any question, you can write us in chat box. Okay, so we have one question, but nobody has written it whom they are asking this question. So the first question that one of the students is asking that, can anyone of you explain what is the new education policy?
Let Lodha ji talk about it. New education.
Well, I think Dr. Sheetal Jain, if
yes,
our
sir.
listeners want to know about the new education policy, your institution should plan a separate seminar for that, because there's so many things to the new education policy that in a minute or two, neither me nor I think my friend Professor Ashitosh Kumar can cover the basic features. But as when I started my presentation, I talked about the 5 basic principles on which the National Education Policy 2020 has emphasized upon, and these relate to fairness, inclusiveness, affordability, accountability, and excellence. So these are the 5 basic substantive issues related to National Education Policy 2020, and whatever structural mechanisms have been envisioned by the National Education Policy relate to fulfillment of these 5 basic principles. So there's a lot of restructuring of the institutions which the National Education Policy talks about. And as I said, the salient ambition of the National Education Policy is that by 2035, the gross enrollment ratio should go up to 50%, which is about 28% right now. So maybe these are the few things which right now we can talk about. But if your audience needs more details, maybe you can think of having a separate seminar on features of National Education Policy.
I would like to add something, that there is the main feature. I mean, new education policy is good in terms of like their vision. It's good in the sense that they taught about how the students may not be confined to a particular discipline. They can have a multidisciplinary approach, and they can choose a paper or a course from one discipline, and they can also go for a course in another discipline. So it's a very much a kind of Western model, that they can earn their grade in a very flexible manner. So this way, like there can be a holistic education. That is the word which is used there. Second thing is that there is a lot of emphasis on research, that how we can have the world-class center or the source, the hub of world-class research and world-class learning. So that's the second thing. And third, the world-class institutions. So as I referred in my presentation also, that there has been a lot of, there has been a kind of obsession that how many institutions in India would have place in the world ranking, all those Times ranking and the ranking being done by the global agencies. So our institution should also be there. And that way, this is very much a kind of a strengthening those institutions which are already doing well and making them a kind of center of excellence. But then I have a problem about that what about the other institutions? What about those institutions which are lagging behind and which are really having such a, the other day I read in Indian Express that there's a central university in North Bihar where the centers have been opened and there is no furniture, there is no infrastructure. In fact, this is a very sorry state of affairs that you just emphasize, as Sanjay Bhai said, you emphasize more on quantity, that 28%, 20%, 30%. What about the quality? So there has been too much emphasis on quantification rather than on the imparting quality to the higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question we have from Krishnakant Tiwari. As you have mentioned about the successful nature of Indian society during the Nalanda and Taxila era of education, so is there any steps Indian universities have taken in the field of Indian social sciences and India political theories?
I think in the history and like social sciences, like history, like you have the Raj Taranjini, that is supposed to be the earliest historical word. So we have not been really very keen, being a civilizational state, we have not been very keen to write history, or even in the field of geography and all. In politics, they say that Kautilya and that was the first and the only modern political text, this Arthashastra. So maybe like in the social sciences, probably Indians really, but then in the philosophical domain, India has been the world beater. I mean, there is no, although the schools, philosophical schools, I'm not really well acquainted with them, but I understand that there has been a lot of take from the Western universities without acknowledging the contribution of Indian philosophical tradition, right?
Thank you so much, sir. And we have a few more questions in the list, but we cannot take it right now because we are running short of time. We need to start technical session also there. And you are the session chair there also, sir. So we end here only. I would like to express my thanks to conveners UDGAM 2021, Dr. Santosh Dhar, for her constant support and guidance. And we are really, really very grateful to both the speakers of the day, Professor Sanjay Lodha, Professor Ashitosh Kumar, for giving your guidance, for enriching us with your knowledge. Each and everyone, thank you so much for being with us throughout this session. Just a last request, panelists, please turn on your video so that we can capture this moment.
And Professor Sanjay ji would preside over the session. It is so, right? So excuse me, and Professor Sanjay Lodha ji would be taking over. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Namaskar, Sanjay bhai. Namaskar, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Would you please turn on your videos? Then? Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. So here we end this session. Thank you so much. Please join us in our next session. Thank you.
सर मीटिंग एंड कर दीजिए. सर